What's going on, everybody? Almost Counts Collectibles here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the new Hasbro Dino Megazord. Now, the Megazord hasn't been out for very long. I'm sure there's a bunch of reviews out there on it, but we're going to take an in-depth look at it and kind of go over my thoughts of it, what you can possibly do with it, and then kind of compare other Megazords in a similar line to this actual Megazord. Now, we're not going to use the Soul of Chogokin Megazord as any kind of comparison because I honestly feel like that is completely out of what this Megazord was designed to be's league. This is your basic Megazord toy made for kids, whereas the Soul of Chogokin Megazord is probably one of the best, most detailed renditions of the Megazord we've ever received. So I feel like that's a really unfair comparison. So what we're actually going to compare this Megazord to is the re-release of the Megazord from the 2010. This is actually the die-cast version. So it's got the metal parts, but all in all, it's very similar to the full-on plastic version, which I feel like is the closest comparison to the new Hasbro Megazord. And then I have an original 1990s Dino Megazord that we're going to compare it to as well. You might be wondering why I have a Dragon Zord here to the side. This is the Legacy Dragon Zord. The reason for that is one of the things that I like about this Megazord, I have to use the Dragon Zord as a comparison to show you. And also, since the original Megazord from the 2010 release and the actual die-cast metal re-release of that Megazord transform very similar to the way the new Hasbro Megazord does, I actually did a compatibility test to see if the Legacy Dragon Zord would at all be compatible to transform together or work together at all with the actual Hasbro Megazord. I'll go over my findings with you in just a moment, but we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and look at each individual Dinozord by themselves, and we're going to talk about the packaging and everything real quick. So I'm going to throw it up on the screen here kind of as I talk about it, but the new Hasbro Dino Megazord does not come in one package with all 5 Dinozords. You actually have to buy it in 3 separate packaging options. Now, one of the packaging options are the leg pieces, which is the Triceratops and Sabertooth Tiger, so they come together. You get the Mastodon and Pterodactyl in another packaging option, and the Pterodactyl does come with the cannons that you can attach as the little legs if you choose to do so. And then the final packaging option is the T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus, and the Power Sword. So those are the 3 packaging options that you have to buy if you want to create the Megazord. My thoughts on that are, I think it's kind of cool for once. Usually we get Dino Megazord all complete in one packaging, which I do love. I have no complaints about that, getting everything together. But something different isn't always bad, and I don't disagree with them releasing different packaging options. It's also cheaper for people to buy. If a kid wants to earn that whole Megazord, they have to be good, and you buy them one packaging option at a time to create that Megazord. So as something that applies to kids, which don't get me wrong, this new Megazord definitely is aimed towards the younger crowd than the more teenage adult collector. But I'm perfectly fine with it. I have no gripes or complaints with it. Didn't think it was a bad idea, so that's just my opinion. You might have a different one. But the packaging options I thought were pretty cool for what they are, and I thought it was a good idea. Now, with each one of the packaging options, you get an instructions sheet. So here we have Triceratops and Sabertooth Tiger. We have Mastodon and Pterodactyl. And we have Tyrannosaurus Rex, which also comes with the Power Sword. Now, these instructions are very colorful. Right here on the one side, you see the instructions to actually put it into tank mode. And then on the other side, which is a lot more colorful, you have the instructions to put it in the configuration to combine it for the actual Dino Megazord. Now, these instructions, like I said, are very colorful. They're very vibrant. The instructions, for the most part, are pretty self-explanatory and easy to follow. So another very good thing about the packaging, I thought the instructions were very well done. And as you can see, with tank mode and regular mode, there aren't really any limitations if I can say that correctly, to this Megazord. It's not like anything was sacrificed. It can still do pretty much everything that the other Megazords can do. So you get the individual Dinozords with some articulation. They combine into tank mode. Tank mode then can turn into Megazord. And all in all, it is the Megazord that we know and love, with even a few additional things that I like more than some of the other Megazords. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. So overall, especially individually, I think it is a great Megazord, but let's go ahead and take a look at each individual one. First, let's go ahead and start with the Power Sword. Now, this is the Power Sword that comes with Tyrannosaurus Rex. It is a basic gray color, no shiny chrome. But the thing I like about this Power Sword is, even though it's basic, it didn't sacrifice on a lot of the detail. It still has all of the raised detail along with the symbols, the little emblems here on the bottom side that kind of looks like lightning or power surging through it. So I thought that was pretty cool. The handle itself is also notched out. The little flares are not on the back side, but it still has the raised texturing. So I thought overall, and it seems pretty sturdy, I thought it was a pretty good Power Sword. We'll go ahead and compare it real quick to some other ones. So this is the die-cast metal version of the Legacy Megazord that we're looking at. So this is that particular chrome Power Sword. Now, obviously, this one is chromed out, and it has a little bit more details on it. It also has the details on the front and the back. But for the most part, even with the raised texturing, it's pretty similar. And I thought it was a pretty fair trade-off. Yes, this is a cheaper version of the Megazord, but the Power Sword itself still looks pretty good. Go ahead and set that aside. We'll go ahead and compare it to the 1990s version of the Dino Megazord. Obviously, the 1990s version is much larger, but it is very similar to the Legacy Megazord. It's got that shiny chrome. It's got the details on both sides. But once again, I'm not disappointed with the sword for the new Megazord. They could have not included one at all. But the one we got, actually, I'm pretty happy with. All right, let's go ahead and look at each individual Dino Megazord here. So we'll go ahead and start with Pterodactyl. Now, the overall look of all of these individual Dinozords, I think, are pretty good, once again, for what they are. The detail is there. Now, we'll talk more about the detail in just a second, especially on some of the other ones. But Pterodactyl here is very similar and very comparable to, you know, a lot of the older Dino Megazords. Just for comparison, I'm going to go ahead and pop the Pterodactyl here off of the Legacy edition, because I feel like it is the most show accurate as far as detail goes of the three. Now, as you can see, the inside here on the new Hasbro edition is red, and it's got the gray additional pieces everywhere, whereas the Legacy version was actually gray all over the inside. Now, I actually prefer the look of the new Hasbro one from the top view. However, I do like the detail on the head a lot better with the Legacy. It's got a little bit more pop to it, a little bit more detail, but the new Hasbro one, once again, is not bad. Let's go ahead and take a look at the front. Now, all of the basic details are there. I do like on the Legacy version how it has the actual gray piece attached to the back of the red piece, so this itself is gray. Whereas this one is the red with some stickers on it, which I don't hate, but I do prefer the look of the Legacy better. Up here on the actual front piece, the window where they would be looking out for the actual chest piece, the Legacy one is the shiny chrome, whereas the Hasbro one is just a painted on silver. The chrome looks better, but to be completely honest, I kind of like the look. If it had a little bit more detail, but I kind of like the look of the Hasbro one better as far as that goes. I even think the actual yellow and blue sticker right here looks a little better than this shiny gold one. This one definitely it has more pop, more flair, but the overall look of the Pterodactyl, we also get the details underneath the wings. You'll see right here on the Hasbro one, whereas it's just a flat, smooth little surface right here for the actual Legacy one. So I feel like even though there are things I do like about the Legacy one better, it's definitely more flashy, has a little bit more detail in some areas. I feel like in a lot of areas, the Hasbro one actually looks a little better. So, I mean, that's just my opinion, but that's the comparison of the pterodactyls. So let's go ahead and set those aside. Now, to be completely fair, I'm trying to be as honest as possible with this review. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 1990s version of Pterodactyl in comparison. Now on the inside, it is more similar to the 90s version without all of the additional gray in the middle. We also have the rivets on top, just like you see right here on the wings. On the bottom, however, on the 90s version, it is also flat. So we get more detail on the top and bottom of the wings with the Hasbro one. I'm going to go ahead and take these cannons off before I knock them off anyway. Going to the back again real quick here, let's look at the actual heads. So once again, just like the Legacy version, I feel like the heads are a little bit better on the other two toys that are the non-Hasbro ones, but the Hasbro one itself, I feel like isn't that bad. But it's just not as good as the other ones. So those are the backside comparisons. Let's go ahead and take a look at the front. So on the 90s one, minus the look of the chest piece, the glass that they would actually be looking through, I like a lot of the other stuff on here better. I like the gray pieces right here on the sides. I do like the non-shiny gold stickers. If this was different on the 90s one and it looked more of that lighter color, kind of a silver, more like this does, I think this one would have looked really well. Now, granted, you can modify these with the show accurate stickers and everything like that, but the Hasbro one just doesn't look bad. I think compared to these two, it holds up really well. It even has some features that I feel like are better than the other two more expensive toys. Now, granted, when the 90s one came out, don't quote me on this, but it was probably around the same price as the Hasbro one, around that $49.99 range. All right, let's go ahead and set Pterodactyl aside. We'll look at the cannons real quick. The cannons are just your basic gray, so nothing shiny, no chrome about it. I feel like if they had more of a chrome metal look to them, they would have looked a lot better. I'll talk more on that in a second, but the basic cannons, and we'll do some comparisons of the cannons here. I want you guys to be able to see as much as possible. So here it is in comparison with the Legacy cannon. A very similar design, just on a little bit smaller scale. I feel like the cannon is a little more emphasized on the Hasbro one than it is on the Legacy version. I feel it looks more like a cannon. So once again, the Hasbro one, I kind of like a little bit better. This is very bulky and a very short cannon on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the original 1990s cannon. All right, so obviously much, much larger. I feel like this is more modeled after the 90s one, just on a little bit a smaller scale. Very similar molding to it. But yeah, all in all, once again, another thing with the new Hasbro Dino Megazord that I feel like holds up very well, looks very good, and yeah, even kind of prefer it over the look of the Legacy one. So there are the actual cannons. All right, let's take a look at Triceratops. Now, Triceratops here is very basic. It really only has two main points of articulation. and that is the head that can move all the way up for actual leg configuration, and the tail that folds all the way up for leg configuration and when you're trying to go into tank mode. So not a lot of articulation or movement. Now, that's not a huge complaint with me. The only other actual form of articulation I would have liked to have seen, that I feel like as small as it is would have made a big difference, is some actual movement with the blasters on the tail here. If this would have been an individual piece that could actually pivot and rotate, I feel like it would have made this particular toy a lot better, that one little thing. Now, we didn't get that, and that's okay. We actually didn't get that in the Legacy version either. I'll show you that in just a second. But I feel like a small addition like that would have made this a lot better and added a little bit more playability to it. But even without it, let's go ahead and take a look at everything else. Now on the side, we have the basic emblems right here above the shielding pieces to the actual treads. So those are pretty accurate, and we get those. We get the black stripes. We do not get the individual labeling or any kind of actual detail down underneath where the tail goes. The head here has the basic, you know, paintings and colors that you would expect. We got the eyes, we have around the head, we have the yellow. And then on the other side, of course, we have the other pieces above the tracks, and that is pretty much it. So you will notice as we go along, as far as actual stickering or labeling or detail and paint goes, that's one place that these kind of suffer. Now they get the basic ones, the ones that kind of make the look of the actual Dinozord are there, but there are additional details and stuff that they have left out. For example, the white line, and we'll go ahead and take a comparison here in a second, but you'll see that there are just some details that aren't there, but for the most part, the ones that are there are good enough. They make the look of the toy look like it's actual, you know, Dino Megazord, so it looks good enough, just it's lacking in some detail. The horns are kind of a plastic rubberized. I wouldn't suggest moving them around. They're not supposed to be moved around, so they don't really move up and down or anything like that. I would avoid kind of playing with those. I feel like that's going to be one of the first things that break on this for a child, are the horns on the Triceratops. I don't know. I'm not going to put it through a strenuous durability test because I don't want to break it for no reason, but I just feel like those are not going to hold up well. I'm not sure exactly how they're in there. If they're just kind of glued in, if they're just a rubber peg that kind of fits down in there. I feel like they're not glued simply because you can get a little rotation out of them if you twist them a little bit. And I feel like if they were completely glued in there, that wouldn't be possible. But I would just be very careful with those because I feel like they're going to be one of the first things to go. Let's go ahead and do a comparison with Legacy here, just to kind of show you some of the detail that's missing, because for the most part, Legacy Triceratops and all the other ones are pretty detailed. All right, so we have Legacy on the bottom and we have Hasbro on the top. Obviously, right away you can tell that the treads are colored in on the Legacy, and everything is just one basic blue plastic color on the Hasbro. So that's one of the main things that kind of sticks out. As I talked about, that white line through the side of the head, we don't get that on the Hasbro. Let's go ahead and take a look at the front. Now, for the front, the actual emblem on the head of the Legacy is more defined. It looks more like the emblem. And on the Hasbro, it's just kind of a couple of yellow marks there, which aren't entirely accurate, but at least we get something close to that symbol, so it still makes it look okay. On the tops, obviously you can see that we get the actual detailed look of the Legacy version, and it's actually gray back here on the neck. whereas on the Hasbro, it's all just one blue basic color. So those are pretty much, and then the entire bottom's gray, of course, on the Legacy. We don't get as much detail, like I said, with the actual Hasbro, but what we do get looks close enough to where it's not terrible. So I'm okay with it, but a little detail is always good. I feel like they could have added a few stickers or a little bit more paint, but it is what it is, and I don't think it's that bad. And I talked about already, oh, also we missed one. So we also don't get the red dot. I didn't show you that. But on the leg pieces, we don't get it on Sabertooth Tiger either. The leg pieces, we do not get the actual red dot on the leg. It's there, it's raised up, just not colored in. And also on the Legacy, where he talked about, it also doesn't pivot for the tail cannons, which I feel like robbed this a little bit too. Would have been kind of cool to have it. We also don't have the black lines on top here now that I'm looking at it that we get with the Legacy. But overall, the main painting and labels are there to make it look good enough. All right, moving on. So that was Triceratops. Let's go ahead and take a look at Sabertooth Tiger next. So Sabertooth Tiger actually doesn't really suffer much in the articulation aspect of things. It still does pretty much everything that the other Sabertooth Tigers did as well. We get the movement of the tail, so you can put it in kind of that cannon launch mode when they're shooting at each other if you want to do that. All of the legs move all the way out and all the way in for when you want to go to tank or Megazord mode. The head also pivots, of course, up and down for when you want to change modes. The teeth actually move up and down, so you can put them up when it's in Megazord form or put them down in Sabertooth Tiger mode. These, once again, something I'm kind of concerned about with elasticity, especially if a child is playing with it. I feel like if you twist those too hard or play with it possibly too much, those are going to break off. But for the most part, they move fairly freely. They stay in place pretty good, but the test of time is only going to be able to tell on that one as far as the durability. So that is the articulation. We get the basic emblems on here as well. Like I said, good enough to make it look like Sabertooth Tiger. Got the emblems on the side, nothing on top. We've got the head emblem, the eyes, the nose. We get a little bit of red on the legs, nothing underneath. And that is pretty much it. So let's go ahead and compare that to a much more detailed Legacy. And we'll see just kind of what we're missing in the detail aspect of things. All right, so we do not have the colored in mouth like we get on the Legacy and the Dino Megazord. Well, the Dino Megazord from the 1990s. We don't have the colored in wheel above the leg like we get. We get the red, but not the black. We don't have the black colors of the ears and right here behind the cheek whiskers. So we don't get that. On the side, we have the main emblem, which is pretty close. We're missing the black color right here above the shoulder. We're missing the actual piece right here. Now, with this particular one, you will notice that the Megazord really isn't, or the particular Dinozord, is missing the actual covering down here on the side. So, you know, we're missing an entire chunk there. So obviously we're kind of missing that emblem as well. What this is basically supposed to be right here is kind of what you see on the leg. The wheels are actually colored in back here where we don't get that on the Hasbro. We do not have the black line on top like we get on the Legacy on the Hasbro. We don't get the details on the inside. We do get the head emblem, one of the main emblems there. As far as underneath goes, pretty similar, other than the coloring of the black. And then on the tail, once again, we do not get the red dot. So that's missing. But all in all, like I said, it has the basic emblems and coloring to look good enough, just not the extra distance for all of the detail. Now, the reason why I'm kind of just comparing it to the Legacy version and I'm not completely taking apart the 1990s one is because the 90s one is very similar in a lot of ways, and this is actually a little bit more show accurate, some of the things on the actual Legacy one, so that's why we're mainly using it for comparison. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Mastodon. Now, I feel like Mastodon, out of all of the Dino Megazords individually, looks the most robbed in the aspect of detail. And the main reason I say that is because of the Mastodon shield / head itself. And what I mean by that is, for most Power Ranger fans, you'll notice right away a lot of things that are missing on this, especially the ears. But this is what a highly detailed Mastodon head looks like. It has the defined gold outlines and everything on both of the ears, which we don't get any of that on the Hasbro. The emblems on the middle of the head are very basic. We get one green one, and that's it, whereas they were a lot more detailed than that. We even are missing a gold one. The eyes are green, of course, like they normally are, but just by comparison, I mean, even I am going to pull out the 90s one for this. Just by instant glance shows you just how basic the Hasbro one is and just how much detail it's missing. I mean, even the 90s one had a lot more stickering and detail than the Hasbro one. So that's just my opinion. That's where I feel like it's lacking the most, is the head, but because that is most, you know, of the actual individual Dinozord, I mean, you see it obviously, and it's severely lacking in detail. So I feel like this one was the most robbed, even though in all fairness, it probably has just as much coloring and emblems as the other ones. It's just more obvious on this guy. So the actual M sticker is pretty accurate. It looks a lot better than the 90s one did, with this basic kind of bland M color. I mean, it was pretty ugly. So this one is a lot more show accurate. We're going to go ahead and compare it to the Legacy one, just so you can see. So this one's a little more shiny and flashier, but for the most part, the emblem itself is pretty much the same, and it looks pretty good. Now, I do need to go ahead and take this off for the next part of the comparison. So let me detach it real quick. We want to get a really good look at this. All right. Now, with the arms, this is one of the main things. So let's go ahead and pop the head off. And I'll put this in somewhat of the form so you can see what I'm talking about here. Trying to be extra careful. All right. With the actual arms, obviously this is missing something that's pretty obvious to everybody. We do not get any of the gold bands or the dot on the actual arm piece, which is actually the hind leg piece when it is in Mastodon mode, but I put it here just for comparison. So that is another kind of eyesore, because the Megazord just kind of doesn't look right without these bands. So I was kind of disappointed to see that it didn't have that, but once again, just one of those sacrifices, I guess. Other than that, Mastodon doesn't really have many stickers, so that's pretty much it. But these are the main ones that it's missing. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of detail, other than a couple lines and stuff on the sides. So let me go ahead and transform this one into Mastodon mode real quick, just so we can get a look. All right, I'm just going to do a basic transformation. So when this is in Mastodon mode, the front of the Mastodon toward the bottom has these lines on it. And I'm going to go ahead and There we go. Bear with me, bear with me. Alright, so let's go ahead and compare them here real quick. So we're missing these lines and of course the actual bands that you see over there. But other than that, it's very similar all the way around. So that's pretty much all we're missing. And then of course we had the heads, but we already talked about that. So you can see just how much more basic and kind of lacking the Mastodon is, even though it's got its two main emblems on it and some details on the head, but it is what it is. All right, let's go ahead and check out Tyrannosaurus. Now, once again, like I've said a bunch through this, even as basic as this toy is, this particular Megazord, and the fact that it's a little bit cheaper, not as much detail went into it, and the fact that it's geared more towards the children than the collector, I feel like it's still a really good toy, and I feel like it's got a lot of good playability. In Triceratops, in Tyrannosaurus mode, the legs, let's talk about articulation. So we have these pegs that stick up, which, I mean, they don't look the best, but I honestly don't really mind that they're there. These are obviously what's used to connect the leg pieces to the actual Megazord, much like the peg pieces on the Legacy Edition here at the end, even though they're in a different spot. I don't hate them. We get good articulation in the actual feet. We get articulation in the knee. And when he's standing up, you can even, pull his legs out a little bit for more of an aggressive, normal stance and not this stiff, like, toy look where he looks like a statue. He's got a little bit of movement there. His hips actually move in and out. So a lot of movement in the legs. The tail really doesn't have that much movement other than going up and coming down. So not a lot of articulation in the tail. The arms themselves go up and down pretty far. So we get a little bit of option there. Unfortunately, they do not bow out, which would have been kind of cool, but as much movement as we get in articulation in the legs, I'm really not going to complain too much about the arms, although it would have been cool to see. Now, when we talk about the actual head, so his head can actually rotate up and down together with the jaw. It can obviously open up. You can see we got a little bit what kind of looks like his blasters in his mouth right there, if you open it just a little bit. And that's pretty much it as far as, that articulation aspect of it goes, and I'm pretty happy with it, actually. It's got more articulation than some of the other ones that were more expensive and a little bit more detailed, so as far as that is concerned, I'm really not that disappointed. I feel like it's got really good playability, and he looks really well. He's got the basic emblems in paint, the blue eyes. We've got the emblems here on the side. Obviously, it's lacking in some detail, much like the other ones. Let's go ahead and see just how much it's lacking. Let's transform this back into T-Rex mode here to get a good comparison. All right, so here we have the Legacy version, and we have the Hasbro version. Now, obviously, there is a lot more detail on the Legacy version. We have the black line down the leg that you should see in Megazord, form. The peg actually is gray, so it blends in better with the knee than this red one that kind of sticks out, but it's pretty much in the same spot. We have, besides the good-looking die-cast metal with the feet down here, we have the red coloring on the feet. We're missing the red band, like we have over here. The chest piece, for the most part, is pretty close. We're missing the black outline and stuff like that, but it looks pretty good, pretty close to what it should look like. We have the emblem on the leg here, at least some yellow coloring of it. Once again, you can see that red band that's missing. We are missing some gray around the head. We're missing the visor on top. So that gray and black we're missing on top of the head. We have the blasters as a decal there, but I actually I like the raised up blaster on the inside of the mouth right here. I think it looks a little bit better. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't hate it. I don't like the actual molding of the little blasters in the mouth as opposed to the sticker. Let's see, what else? Let's try to make sure we don't get anything or miss anything before we move on here. We'll talk more about the helmet in the other mode. Let's take a look at the back. So we're missing the gray coloring of the actual little thrusters back here. And then finally the tail. Obviously the tail looks a lot better on the actual Legacy version than it does with the Hasbro version, but one of those sacrifices. But all in all, I think it looks really well. No complaints, but that is just a comparison to the more detailed Legacy version. All right, so we've taken a look at all of them individually. Let's go ahead and talk about tank mode. So let's go ahead and put this into tank mode. So it transforms pretty much like all of the other Megazords did in the past. And we are going to go ahead and transform them one at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the fangs of Sabertooth Tiger. We're going to go ahead and lower it down. And it's very easy to transform these pieces. I don't have to put a lot of pressure or anything like that on them. They transform pretty well by themselves. Now the pegs attach into the corresponding holes, just like the Legacy Edition did. These are very snug, so be very careful pushing them together. Don't put a lot of force on it, just nice and steady until it snaps into place. Let's go ahead and put head down on Triceratops here. Do the same thing. Once again, nice and steady until it snaps into place. All right, so we have our leg pieces. We are going to go ahead and take Mastodon here. And we are going to fold out the legs. Now, this is one thing I'm going to say about Mastodon. The hardest part of this entire Megazord is actually unsnapping the arms of Mastodon. They are in there very good. And it's like that on both of these toys, the one in the background and this one. I have two of these. And this right here, I mean, they're held into place very good. So just be careful pulling these up, because they definitely, and you'll hear that snap of them unsnapping because they're held in there really good. I try to be extra careful with my things, so I probably could have done it a lot faster if I'd have just manhandled it, but I really don't want to. But yeah, these little snaps hold on to those really well. All right. We are going to go ahead and I'm just getting everything lined up. And we're going to go ahead and put Mastodon on the back. And we're going to snap it into place. Get things lined up. We'll go ahead and take Mastodon's head here. Now, when you pop this lever up, you have to grab it right here with like a nail to pull it up around this. Otherwise, it's in there pretty good. So just keep that in mind. That's the point where you want to try to pull up at, and it should pop right up. We're going to put that down in down in there. Now, I don't know how far exactly that handle is supposed to slide down in there. I just put it in about that first little notch. I don't know if it slides all the way down in there. I kind of almost don't even want to try to put it down in there that far because I feel like it'd be really hard to get out. So I just push it in till it gets past that first little notch on the handle, and that's pretty much it. All right, we're going to take our cannons, and we're going to put our cannons in the feet. And we are going to take Pterodactyl and put Pterodactyl in the back. Now the way that I do this is, and I didn't double check on the instructions, but I actually slide the little notches on the front of Pterodactyl from the bottom of the feet up. I do not start at the top of the feet and slide down. It's a shorter distance from the bottom, and I feel like it goes in there better. All right, so we are in tank mode. So there's tank mode. Looks pretty good. A lot like a lot like the original Megazords. And of course you can kind of play with the angling and everything of Tyrannosaurus to figure it out, but everything goes together pretty smoothly. I did it kind of carefully, so it might have taken me a little bit longer, but once you get the hang of how it goes together, it's very easy to put it together. The hardest thing of all of it is literally unsnapping Mastodon's legs. I am very slow with it because I just want to be careful with it. It might hold up to just ripping it open every time. I don't know. But that is the hardest part. Everything else goes together pretty well. And you've got the tail back here to kind of use to roll your tank mode along. And it goes together just like it should. So that is tank mode. Now let's go ahead and transform him. So when you want to transform him, just go ahead and pop Mastodon's shield off. Let's go ahead and take Pterodactyl. Pterodactyl's going to fly away. We're going to pop off the cannons. And we're going to activate Megazord sequence. And we're going to go ahead and stand it up. And I made that look a little sloppy, but it actually, it does that sequence pretty smooth. So then you have, you know, your Megazord standing here. We're going to go ahead and pop the head down in. Pterodactyl. It's going to fly in there and turn around for the chest piece. And all you got to do is line it up. And it snaps right on. We're going to raise up the arm pieces. And we are going to snap the mask pieces forward. And what we have left is the Megazord. Now I'm going to set this one aside and use the one we already have here. Now, once we are in Megazord form, I feel like this Megazord is one of the best Megazords as far as playability, mobility, articulation go. And the reason I say that is, so with the legs, we can actually pull these legs out pretty far, just like the T-Rex, all right? We can also twist the legs in and out, either at the knee joint or up here at the hip. And we can kind of turn the entire leg. Now, it's a little limited because of the foot here in the back, but it is still very possible to turn. And why is that not turning anymore? Oh, there we go. All right. So when you pull it out away from the hip a little bit, then it will actually start to turn in and out. So if you wanted a real aggressive stance or a really cool pose, it's very possible to get that because of the articulation of the actual T-Rex. So you can bend these out, you can bend the legs out, and you know, if only Megazord's head actually rotated, you could even have him looking to the side in kind of an aggressive stance. But just look at what you can do with the legs here. Now, in order to turn this piece, you have to pull it out just a little bit, so it's got a little bit of separation. That's why it didn't really want to turn for me. But yeah, I mean, these leg options are pretty good as far as moving it around. The old 90s Megazord had a little bit of mobility just because of the way the toy was made with the legs. You could move them a little bit, but this is really crazy. I mean, you can have him kick. You know, you can do quite a bit with the leg movement. One of the other things that I really love about this Megazord is the simple ability to actually move the arms up and down. The elbows are fully movable, so you got like a 90-degree turn up and down. You can actually spin it in and out, and then the whole arm will go up and down. The movement of the arms and the legs on top of the overall look of this Megazord is what make this Megazord great, because the other Megazords were severely limited in their articulation in Megazord form. Let's go ahead and build Legacy back just for comparison, so we can actually do a little side-by-side on that, because it's, I mean, it's night and day, the mobility that you have with this Hasbro Megazord, especially with the arms. I mean, it's ridiculous in a good way. And in case you can't tell by my, review already, I love this Megazord. I highly recommend it. I think it's great. We're going to talk a little bit more about a couple other things I like about it in a second when we get to it. But let me go ahead and get this guy back to where he needs to be. All right. So, for comparison purposes, we have the arm of the Legacy Megazord. The elbow does not turn in and out. It also does not turn up and down. This is one solid arm that simply goes up and down. The legs are a little bit more similar to the Hasbro as formed in the form of movement. The knee joint can bend up a little bit. The legs have a little bit of leeway to spread out a little. The entire leg, of course, can go up and down, but it just pales in comparison as far as that articulation goes to the Hasbro Megazord, where you can manipulate all of these different things around for posability and playability. And that is what I love about this Hasbro Megazord. I mean, I think it's awesome. Now, the overall look of it, of course, it's lacking in detail, but there is a fix for that. And I'm actually going to modify my second Hasbro Megazord. The modification that I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the gray pieces and I'm going to paint them a metal chrome color. After I do that, I am going to apply show accurate decals to this figure via Blind Drummer 15, who makes decals and emblems and custom coins and things like that. They have already created a show accurate, or as show accurate as it can be, sticker sheet for the Hasbro Megazord. So we're going to do a little bit of custom paint. We're going to throw the more show accurate stickers on it. And we are going to check out just what is possible with this actual Hasbro Megazord, because the basic product, I believe, is one of the better Megazords that we've received in a long time. Now, the Legacy one, highly detailed, especially with the die-cast metal, very cool. But it's mainly for looks. When it comes to posability, playability, it's basically the original Dino Megazord. There weren't a lot of leaps and bounds or adjustments made in its playability in Megazord form or its posability. The articulation just isn't there. It still has the basic old articulation of the old toy. This changed that in several ways with all these additional moving joints that just make for some really cool possibilities. And it just looks good. I think it overall, the look of it is great. And once we get that additional detail on it, it's going to look even better. Now, the reason why I pulled that Dragonzord out, of course, was to do some tests with it. One of the other things I love about the new Hasbro Megazord is because it is very size similar to the Legacy Dragonzord. I feel like these two Megazords standing together are what it should be. The Megazord, I mean, with the fin of the actual Dragonzord, he's taller, but his overall, his body and everything looks slightly smaller than the Megazord. Standing side by side, I feel that these best represent what they looked like standing next to each other in the show. And every time we get a Megazord and a Dragonzord, the Dragonzord is too much smaller than the Megazord, and they just don't look right. For example, the Legacy Megazord and the Legacy Dragonzord standing together, as great as they look individually, it just doesn't look right, I don't feel like. I feel like the Dragonzord still is too small. I mean, he just looks too big, and in the show they were very similar in size, and every time we get these two, the Megazord is always taller. Now, I realize in order to make them combine and to make them work the way they're supposed to, it's probably hard to squeeze some height out of the Dragonzord. But I feel like there are some things that could be done to make him stand a little bit taller. But that's neither here nor there. I just feel like these two particular Megazords standing next to each other, especially once this Hasbro one is custom painted with the actual metal coloring that's going to more match the Legacy Dragonzord, and it has the much more detailed emblems all over it. These two standing next to each other is going to be something really cool to see, because I feel like that's it right there, those two. Now, I hope we get a Dragonzord to go with the Hasbro Megazord. I hope it is kind of the same size as the Legacy, although I don't feel like it's going to be if we do get one. And the reason I hope we get a Dragonzord is because I have tried to combine this Dragonzord with Hasbro Megazord. And unfortunately, and I kind of feel like it might have been done on purpose, the pegs on the actual Megazord, or the holes on top of Sabertooth Tiger and Triceratops that Dragonzord's pegs would actually go into to form Dragonzord in fighting mode, are just I mean, the difference in size, it is just a tad bit too small for this peg. And I feel like it is so close. I mean, it almost looks like it should fit, but when you put it on there, it is just slightly too big. And it won't actually go down in there. The pegs even look the same as far as their shape. It is just slightly, ever so slightly too big. So that wouldn't work. So then I tried putting Dragonzord on top of Megazord, like you would if you were doing the Titanus Ultrazord combination. And you can get him to sit on top of Megazord if you take the tail, and this is something I forgot to mention earlier. So the top of the tail actually doesn't fold down like on the other Megazords. Actually, his doesn't either. But hold on, let me show you right here on... So the original 90s T-Rex, the tail actually folded down back here to make more space. If this Hasbro Megazord did that, it would have had enough room for Dragonzord. The tail on Legacy is short enough to where you don't really need to do that, but this one sticks up way too far. So if you try to put him on there with the tail, it's in the way, so you just have to push it backwards. So it's possible if you just push the tail back out of the way, kind of right there, which looks a little stupid, but from the front you don't really see it. And then if you push these down just a little bit, you can actually get Dragonzord, and of course you put the horns back, you can get Dragonzord to sit on there. But he's so heavy that he constantly bows up in the middle, and it just doesn't look right, and he won't really stay on there by himself. So unfortunately, if you were wondering, no, Dragonzord, at least Legacy Dragonzord, is not compatible with Hasbro Megazord. I have tried. But I figured since the transformation and the construction is very similar to the Legacy, I would give it a try and let you guys know my findings. Like I said, unfortunately, those findings are not compatible. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So that has been my, my little review here of the Hasbro Megazord. I think it is a great toy. I absolutely love it. I think it is very refreshing to see even something that was meant for more of the kid aspect of the toy line turn out as well as it did. Because, yeah, guys, if you were looking for a more playable, not really as fragile, something that you actually, feel comfortable transforming and you don't want to mess up because it's insanely hard to find and it's really expensive, this cheaper Hasbro Megazord is a great Megazord. The articulation is really what makes this what it is. The overall look of it, like I said before, it's got everything it needs to look like Megazord, but with a little bit of custom paint and those show accurate decals that you can pick up from, I'm going to get mine from Blind Drummer 15, BD 15. If you want to Google it, you can check that out. He's got some really cool stuff, even for your old Megazords. I'm sure maybe Repro labels. They also do labels as well, and other people probably do. But yeah, I'm very excited to customize one of these and see what the end product looks like, because overall it's a great Megazord. I'd love to know what you guys think about it, and let me know any questions that you have, anything you want me to try that I didn't try. And yeah, so Hasbro Megazord, awesome. I think you guys should definitely try to pick one up. And I'm going to go ahead and end it there. So until next time, everybody, I will see you next video.